It gives me great delight and a privilege to be meeting with CA MP Vijaykumar, MPV as most people call him, who is the CFO of Sify Technologies. MPV is also a past Senate Council member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and the former chairman of the Accounting Standard Boards of India. I'm here at the office of Sify to be speaking to him on matters relating to audit. Thank you, MP, for your time and inviting me to your office for this conversation.
Thanks, Balaji, for this initiating this conversation, and compliments to you for conceptualizing true and fair and putting in efforts to bring together a team to execute that novel idea. Best wishes to you.
Thank you, MPV. We will strive to do the best for the profession.
Sure.
So, MPV, what we are doing in these conversations is also using you people as a sounding board to see what are your thoughts on the audit profession and what we need to be doing in true and fair in terms of some of the thoughts. So, I'll start my questions. The first one is the most common question, which is the regulatory expectation gap. Today, regulators are looking at auditors and criticizing their quality of work and their work, not just in India, internationally also. In India, we're feeling the heat a bit more because we are not being used to this particular sort of a momentum, but that's coming in probably in the right direction, but we are not used to it. How should the auditors gear up to face this, and what should they be doing to meet and improve the expectation compliance with the regulators?
So, Balaji, as far as the auditors' efforts or preparedness to meet the expectation of the regulators is concerned, my view is just two things. Look very simple but difficult to follow. One is increasing technical competence in the area of audit. That's extremely important, both in terms of the quality of people in the engagement team and the tools which you use. The second is leadership in the audit firms and audit fraternity. I've always believed that leadership is about trust. And in an audit, it's all about gaining the trust of all the stakeholders. So it's important that we should be able to develop leaders in the audit fraternity who can gain the trust of all the stakeholders. I think these are two important things which needs to be done. But let me go one step forward as far as the regulatory engagement is concerned. Speaking from my experience of engaging with ACC, who is also and PCOB is also an equally strong regulator. My experience of their approach has been towards more, what should I say, educative and helping improving the quality of financial reporting. So as a company, we have never hesitated in acknowledging that yes, this is an area where a better reporting is possible and we will do it henceforth. I think that confidence building is also very important. So if regulator can also take that approach, I'm sure the audit fraternity will scale and meet the expectation of the regulators.
That's a good point, MP, because today, on one side, auditors are probably in denial because they view the regulator as a pure opponent,
Exactly.
They are not looking as a person who is going to be working with them in collaboratively improving audit quality. I think auditors, we can say the regulators should take the first step, but I think at the end of the day, auditors should also take the first move.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Only thing is, cases of fraud, be ruthless. But cases with reference to judgment aspects and all, if they are not bordering on fraud, I think it has to be more about collaborating for improving the quality of financial reporting. That's my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, so on the reporting itself, auditors reporting itself, in true and fair, we believe that the objective of an audit to provide reasonable assurance is probably outdated because market expectation is different, regulatory expectation is different. We as auditors, in fact, are doing more work than what we used to do traditionally because today information technology has come. We are using a lot of IT specialists, technology tools, data analytics. We are actually testing more population. Sampling is probably on its way out in the audit. So under the circumstances, why should the auditors continue to call their report as reasonable assurance? So why can't they take the first step to say that I'm confident to say that I'm giving a better assurance than a real assurance. I'm very clear that we can't give absolute assurance because we have management override of controls which even the best of audits may not detect. Inherent concept of materiality is there in audit, therefore you can never say it's true and correct, it's always true and fair, which will be the language used in the audit report. But can the auditors take an effort to move away from reasonable assurance as a first step, because that itself will open up the investors to say, okay, now the auditors are changing.
Yeah. So two things, Balaji. One is when it comes to reasonable assurance, the audit community, auditors fraternity, should acknowledge that it is a fairly high level of promise. At times I come across situation where people taking shelter that reasonable assurance is a lower level of promise, which I don't agree. Reasonable assurance itself is a fairly higher level of promise. If we want to find another level between reasonable and absolute, I think it's a matter of further research, debate, and things like that. But as I mentioned, audit fraternity should take reasonable assurance as pretty serious, and that's the high level of promise, and we need to deliver that quality. And for the user community, it's very important for them to have an appropriate understanding of what they can expect from an audit of the financial statement, which is done as per the framework, While, in fact, I keep listening to this that now with automation, digitalization, tools, IT, 100% transaction audit, I think that all of these digitalization and tools might help you to do a transaction level audit. But financial statements is beyond transactions. It is about a lot of estimates. It's about judgments, use of materiality, both at the preparer's end and at the auditor's end. So given this kind of element relating to financial statement, including valuations, etc., it is never going to be possible to give an assurance which, as you rightly mentioned, can never be absolute assurance. But finding another terminology in between, as I said, is a matter of research. But my view, the current terminology itself is pretty good enough, as long as people understand that it itself is a high level of promise. And if you look at the current audit reporting methodology which we have, be it SA 701 or 706, which I evolved particularly in the last 12-13 years, I believe are good developments which help people to communicate well about the work they have done and the audit observations which are there. And that actually communicates a little more than the main audit report of SA 700. And beyond this, if you take a jurisdiction like India, you have the IFC certification, which tends to give you literally a higher level of promise than a reasonable assurance regarding the existence of internal controls. So it's about the audit fraternity taking reasonable assurance seriously, and investor community also understanding what it means. Those are my views.
So you were talking about leadership in the first one from the audit firm's perspective as to how they need to start building trust with the stakeholders. See, leadership is a component of system of quality control. When it comes to the overall quality control system, I'm not looking at a stakeholder engagement, I'm looking purely internal to the firm. Now, when I have been meeting with audit firms, there is a perception which I am getting, very strong perception I'm getting, that if the audit firm does a good job in an audit, that itself is a demonstration that the SQC is in place and therefore they don't need to do anything further on SQC. Because today one of the service offerings we are offering is quality policies. I'm not seeing much of an interest there. I'm wondering, where am I missing out something which we are doing wrong?
No, I don't agree. It's extremely important to have a process-oriented approach as far as quality is concerned, and particularly in areas of audit. Everything should be verifiable at a later date to form an opinion on the quality of the audit. Because tomorrow if there's a failure, one should be able to demonstrate that the failure has happened despite the best processes. And let us also understand the harsh reality that engagement teams many occasions are floating teams. So unless you have a very well documented process and the compliance with the process also documented, I don't think quality can be achieved. It can be achieved as an exception, but not as a rule.
Yeah.
So if you want quality as a rule, it has to necessarily go through a process-oriented approach.
Yeah, that's why probably system of quality control, not just quality control.
Exactly.
So, MP, my next question is, there is a talk about joint audits becoming applicable in India. We don't know where it's going to head. I'm not getting into whether it's good or bad, but assuming that it's going to come through, how should the audit firms prepare themselves? Because when I was in the Big Four, one of the biggest concerns we used to have when I was in the Big Four was, I will end up dividing the work on paper, but in substance, as a large firm, I will continue to do all the work because I may not really trust the work of the other auditor. One. Two, if there is a risk, I also get completely exposed. I get half the fees, but I'm exposed to 100% of the risk because the joint auditor can drag me into that risk. So, how should the auditors prepare themselves to be in this market where the expectation of the stakeholders are high, regulators are high, opportunities are coming through? There are multiple things which are going actually in favor of the audit firms. So, how should the audit firms prepare themselves for this?
As you said, I'm not getting to the topic of whether joint audits should come good. I'm not getting into the topic. But if joint audits have to be effective, my view, it's important that the joint audits firms are equals. If they are unequal, then the objective of joint audit will not be achieved. So, if in terms of capacity of the audit firms, in terms of industry level expertise, in terms of engagement team size, overall maturity of the firm in terms of audit processes and their internal quality review checks, unless both of them are at least closer to equal in size, I don't think joint audits will achieve the objective which it is intending to achieve. And for this, if there are firms who are aspiring to do joint audits with firms who are much more established, I think there is a substantial capacity development which they have to invest in. Some of them are expecting that we will develop capacity by jointly working and learning from the others. But that could be too costly for both the parties and for the auditee as well, because auditee is not a testing ground.
Correct.
It cannot become a testing ground, particularly for listed companies with the quarterly audits and so much time-related pressures cannot be a testing ground. So, my view, at least what I am seeing over the last decade, many firms have consciously invested in capacity building, and as long as they pick up audits in areas or sectors where they have expertise and teams who have matured, I think joint auditors would work. The model which you mentioned, I think that's not fair for either of the firms or for the auditee concerned. That is not the intent of a joint audit.
Yeah. So, MP, you spoke about capacity building. Where do you see networking in India? Because we are not seeing significant positives in that, though the intention is very good and positive.
Yeah.
In actual ground practice, we are not seeing a large network in India which is which can actually compete with some of the large firms. We are not hearing about any large network, whichever way it is.
No, it
so
isn't happening.
So what is the bottleneck there? What can be done to improve that particular? Because capacity building, I think, can be achieved through networking. It's actually much faster, actually. But somehow there is a resistance in terms of that particular aspect. What is the bottleneck there, and what can be done?
It isn't happening, as you rightly mentioned, Balaji. The institute has also been making efforts to make this model successful.
Absolutely.
In fact, the institute has debated it multiple times, and they've issued the
new guidelines bring in a franchisee model also. So there are a lot of good things.
They've tried all kinds of things which are possible to enable networking, but we aren't seeing it happen. I'll find it difficult to identify very appropriate reasons at this point of time, because I've not had conversations in the recent past as to why people have not embraced the new networking guidelines. Only then I think we'll have some tangible reasons. But if we were to look at typically the firms, the way they have grown so far, they've all been very comfortable with organic growth, working within a particular culture. I think to break that and work cross-culturally with people of other cultures in the network and then define a common culture for network, I think it will take time, Balaji. My view, with the new guidelines which have come, 10 years from now, if we are able to develop at least 10 good networks, I think Institute would have achieved the objective. So let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. I'm not able to place a reason as to why it's still not taken off. Maybe we came up with these guidelines during the pandemic period. Yeah. Maybe we haven't socialized it still enough with the firms. So Institute is committed to make it successful. If practicing units have difficulty, I'm sure Institute will listen and tweak to help networks to be formed. So let's wait and see, Balaji.
So one of the things I was thinking as I was leaving my past firm was that my past firm, though part of a network, comprised of 4 or 5 very large firms, strong presence in India, correct, each individually. Correct. But collectively, the firms integrated pretty well. We took some time, maybe 4-5 years exactly. time, but 4-5 years time is a pretty exactly. fast thing considering the size of these correct. Firms and the personalities involved in that. Correct. But one of the things which struck me there, why was the integration possible in 4-5 years time, was two things. One is there was a very strong culture which unified the firms, which was a culture of quality. Exactly. Second is lot of the documentation and processes were all similar. Correct. Therefore, I could easily imagine what the other firm was doing correct. In work because they were using the same technologies tools. We unified the training agenda. Correct. So everybody started talking the same terminology, same training pattern, everything. Therefore, the unification was sort of faster. We at True and Fair are trying to see whether we can provide that sort of an environment to firms who wants to work with us to see whether we can integrate them, because our vision is to build the capacity, capability and the quality of the firms. It's not just quality which we are focusing on. We are not going to get into operations, but this is something which we are trying to do. I
think that's a good thought, Balaji. I think you should make an attempt towards that, because for networking firms, today, for them, once we come to a network, beyond potential business sharing, there should be something tangible as a takeaway on day one. Maybe True and Fair can fill that and tell that, look, here is the quality control process which all the firms in the network can follow from day one. So you could actually bring in a value which can actually bind all of them to be together. So it's a good thought. I think you should give a shot.
Yeah. So that was another question sure. Which I had. Last question I have is the matter on fraud. Okay. Now again, there is an expectation gap there. We as True and Fair are going to be giving a lot of emphasis on fraud in terms of how consciously the fraud should be approached by an auditor in our audit and how consciously can demonstrate compliance with it. Because today there is a feeling that auditors don't want to take responsibility on fraud because they say that we are not responsible for detecting fraud. Whereas the market expectation is that auditors are responsible, they are doing more work there, they're spending thousands of hours, so they should be detecting the fraud. So what should be the auditors doing in this scenario? Because they can't stay stagnant as where they are. They need to definitely move up. Obviously, they may not be able to detect all the frauds, but they should be doing something more and probably even communicating something more, which is missing today. Because today the stakeholders don't know what is the auditor exactly doing on this matter.
Two things, Balaji, on this. One is, as far as the communication part is concerned, it's a very valid point, but that communication should happen from the regulators and an accounting body like the Institute, who should communicate to the people in terms of what is it that they can expect from the auditors. I think that is one important step, because rather than auditors telling that you can expect from me only so much, which people will not buy, it's important that independent regulators or statutory body should communicate that so that people will understand that, okay, someone independent is saying that. That's one. But second important thing in terms of addressing the gap, because while communication can happen, investors and users of financial statements will continue to have the expectation that once audit is done, it should be sort of devoid of fraud, but we all know it's just not possible. One way to address that is a collective effort from both the preparer, the management, and the auditors is investment in internal audits, internal controls. The stronger the internal controls and the internal audit, which are the best in terms of both preventive and detective, if both of them are committed towards ensuring high quality internal audit, I think we can minimize the fraud.
Thank you, MPV, for your time and answering my questions very, very clearly and comprehensively. We will certainly consider your inputs as we develop our quality policies. We will, of course, share our policies with you as part of the advisory board of True and Fair, and we look forward to enhancing the quality of this profile. Thank you, MPV.
Thank you, Balaji, and best wishes. And all the questions are quite very thought-provoking, very deep, and that's why I had to take some time to articulate as well. But I think you're going in the right direction, so best wishes to you.
Thank you. Thanks.